But of course, Lukaku leaving seems to be a big part of this. There's been some reports today that Inter Milan are ready to make another improved offer for him. How likely is it that he leaves this summer, and where do you think Lukaku will end up?
Well, Lukaku only wants Inter. That's the first thing to say. But you also have to explore other options because it's a difficult deal between Chelsea and Inter. So there's three clubs that are looking at Lukaku. Inter, who want him, and Lukaku is waiting for a bid that's acceptable to Chelsea, who want around 45 million euros, as I reported a few days ago. Then you've got Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia, and there's a big offer there to Lukaku. He had previously rejected that, but he will more seriously consider Saudi Arabia if Inter falls through. But he won't do anything until he sees whether Inter is possible. That's the focus and needs to be clarified. And then obviously if Inter agree a package with Chelsea, suddenly everyone else is quite clearly out the race. But if something is not possible due to Inter's finances with Chelsea, then he also doesn't want to stay at Chelsea. So suddenly that's where the other clubs might be able to enter the race. And I don't think there's anything in this Vlahovic for Lukaku type theory, because Chelsea are not yet in talks with Juventus. Vlahovic, as I revealed in December, has been on Chelsea's list for quite some time, but they've not made any offer. So there's been no talk of a swap deal for Vlahovic. And also it's not thought that Lukaku has any real interest in going to Juventus, even though they've explored the terms of the deal. With Al Hilal, it's interesting because maybe the player, as he sees how the Saudi league will grow, will change his mind if, and this is the key part, Inter doesn't come off. So Inter can be calm about the situation because Lukaku is not going to do anything until Inter and Chelsea talk. But Inter are miles off the Chelsea valuation. Their last bid that was rejected out of hand was about 15 million below the expectations of Chelsea. And yes, there's gamesmanship and maybe some compromise here. So you could maybe say 10 million because maybe Chelsea's 45 million euros will come down to 40 million euros. But this is the sort of advantage to all clubs when you have Saudi interest, that they are prepared to meet the asking price. And as a consequence, you can use that as a lot of leverage to really push other offers up. So I think at the end of the day, and maybe even by the end of this week or early next week, Lukaku probably will end up returning to Inter, only because Chelsea want to resolve the situation. And if Inter get to about 35 or 40 million euros, then I think Chelsea would prefer just to resolve that situation permanently. But if Inter cannot make it work, or do not use the Onana money to get close to Chelsea's number, that's when it gets more drawn out. That's when it gets more complicated. That's when Al Hilal will be able to return to the table. And whereas Lukaku has kind of indicated, to my knowledge, that Juventus is a no, Al Hilal haven't really been given that definitive no. They've just been told the player's looking for Europe. The player respects the offer. The player knows the money is good. The player is going to try and work it out with Inter. And Chelsea know that. But if it all falls through, then Al Hilal will pounce again, and we have to wait and see how Lukaku responds to that. But it's in Inter's hands at the moment. And then just on Chelsea and the striker, I don't think that Lukaku going is tied towards Chelsea getting in a more traditional number 9. And that's where the whole Vlahovic for Lukaku swap deal was a little bit misleading. Mauricio Pochettino is going to assess both Nicolas Jackson, who scored 9 goals in his last 8 La Liga games for Villarreal before moving, and Amanda Broja, who Chelsea rate highly and obviously is back from a long spell out with a ruptured ACL. So there's 2 forwards there. And on the one hand, it's a long window and Chelsea will see who's available in the market. So there is a very realistic possibility that another striker comes in. But it's not 100% guaranteed because Chelsea have to be respectful to Nicolas Jackson and to Amanda Broja. And because Pochettino is likely to play a 4-2-3-1, there's only one leading spot there. And he may feel that he needs depth, but if in game management to play up top, you've got a lot of other players that can obviously be part of the forward line at Chelsea as well. Christopher Nkunku, let's not forget, even though it's not his natural position, can also play as a number 9. Raheem Sterling is versatile and can play in a variety of positions too. So Chelsea are not worried about the striker situation. They're just worried about goals, which means that if over the course of the next few weeks they feel that they need to strengthen, it's still a very realistic possibility. But at the moment, they're basically just working on Caicedo, trying to get that over the line, and then they'll look at Broja and Jackson in pre-season and determine whether they need to bring in a traditional number 9, which is likely but not guaranteed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know a transfer deal that's, I wouldn't say it's confusing to Chelsea fans, but the Caicedo deal now feels like it's been dragging on for a while. Ornstein reported a £60 million bid was made probably about 7-8 weeks ago now, and you add it all together. No new bid or official bid as of yet. There's still this talk of £100 million being the asking price. What is the latest with Caicedo, and when can Chelsea fans expect movement around this deal?
I wouldn't worry too much.
Sorry.
I wouldn't worry too much about the asking price because it's structure, not number. And people hate it when I say this, but it's a really key point of any transfer window. 100 million means nothing if it's 70 million up front and in 5 years, and 30 million only if Chelsea win the Champions League 1 million times. Obviously, I'm exaggerating and making up an extreme scenario, but a non-gettable add-on. Because then you're basically only likely to get 70 million and you're getting it over 5 years. Whereas the same 70 million paid in 2 installments with 10 million if the player makes 50 appearances for the club is almost 80 million guaranteed, and arguably a better deal, therefore, than 100 million. But people only focus on the number, and they wonder why Chelsea don't just go up and up and up to get the player, or why Brighton don't go down. And in this case, the number's not going to be as important as the structure. And that's why the talks are complicated. And Chelsea are basically having almost daily verbal conversations with Brighton to get to a position where if they bid formally, they believe that there's a consensus rather than wasting their time making a bid and seeing it turned away. So Chelsea's starting position in January was 55 million. A few weeks back, as you say, was 60 million. And that tells you that they don't want to pay 100 million, because if you're starting with a marker bid at 60 million that Chelsea knew was going to be rejected, they're not going to want to go up from 60 to 100 million. One, because it's a big leap and financial outlay, but two, that's not the most disciplined approach. And if the industry realizes when you came in at 60, you went up to 100, then everybody's going to start milking you for more and more and more money. And this is why Chelsea need to be very strict and bullish with their position. And then from Brighton's point of view, of course, they're going to try for 100 million if they can possibly get it. Of course, they're going to be mentioning the Declan Rice fee and arguing that Caicedo is equivalent. And when we say equivalent, we're not talking like for like in terms of who's better as a player. It's about age and profile and potential, but it's also about contract length. And this is where Brighton are in a stronger position because Moises Caicedo extended his Brighton contract. So the value has been protected, whereas obviously with Declan Rice, there was 1 year left and then only the opportunity to extend by a further year. So Caicedo has got more time left on the contract, and that adds value as well. So how Brighton come to a number is influenced by a series of variables. But the difference between January and now is that in January, Brighton were on automatic not for sale. And now they've told the player verbally that for the right offer, they are prepared to let him go. So Caicedo would like Chelsea. There's no other suitors yet in the race. We wait and see whether there's any kind of twist. And Chelsea will push for around 80 million. In fact, their starting point's been lower. And Brighton are talking about a higher number. And when you have that gulf in valuation, there might just be a compromise around the 85 or 90 million mark, but there might be some flexibility around structure and also things like sell-on clauses too, because Caicedo's young. So if he works at Chelsea, in 5 years' time, someone else might want him. If he doesn't work at Chelsea, he still might be worth 40, 50, 60 million in a few years' time. So if Brighton can't get that 100 million, then maybe it's through a sell-on clause. Maybe it's through a lower number, but better payment terms. There's all manner of ways that you can discuss this. And this is ultimately why the talks are taking time.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. It's a very, very big deal. Lots of things to factor in, and one that that not all the deals are going to be done as quickly as the Declan Rices and the Mounts and the Kai Havertz and what else this summer. So it makes a lot of sense that it's taking that amount of time.